Our first speaker joined the Marine Corps in 1965 and was sent to the U.S. Navy Pilot Training Program in Pensacola, Florida in 66 and 67. In late 1967, he was transferred to Santa Ana for advanced combat helicopter training. He was deployed to Vietnam in January of 1968 for a 13-month tour, during which he flew over 800 combat missions, earning 40 air medals, several personal awards, including the Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry with Silver Star and 2 Purple Hearts. He'll be speaking about his flying experience today in the Vietnam War. He returned from Vietnam in 1969 and was an advanced combat pilot instructor, attaining the rank of captain until retiring to civilian life in 1970. He went on to be a corporate pilot for Southern California Edison before embarking on a long career in commercial real estate. Fred and Shireen, his wife of 50 years, have lived in Santa Maria for 23 years, where both have been active volunteers in numerous community organizations. He started volunteering as a mentor for VTC here in Santa Maria in February of 2013, and he's mentored more than a dozen veterans. He is what I would definitely consider a very good friend of our court. He is an active participant, a volunteer, and he has one of the biggest hearts that of anybody that you'll ever meet, him and his wife. If you didn't know, recently he opened a house in Santa Maria, helped open a house in Santa Maria that we now call Camp Flores. And it's because of Fred and his generosity, him and his wife, that some of our veterans are now housed in a safe and stable environment here in Santa Maria. So please help me welcome Mr. Fred Pratt.
Thank you very much.
Some of you might recognize this. I think I need it. I probably need it. I was thinking before that I don't remember being this nervous before any of those crazy missions we used to fly in Vietnam. I think it's probably because we're well trained in flying this wonderful piece of equipment and not well trained at all in public speaking. So I think that it's going to become obvious fairly quickly here, so bear with me as I move along. There were thousands, literally thousands of helicopter pilots over the 10-year period in Vietnam. There were Army guys, there were Marine Corps pilots, there were Navy and Air Force pilots flying SAR missions for their pilots that were their jet pilots that had been down both in North and South Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos. Didn't make much difference, quite frankly. All the helicopter pilots, we were really pretty much in the same boat. We were all doing the same things, flying the same missions. We're all simply trying to, excuse me, I told you this wasn't going to work. I told you. I was simply trying to get the job done as best that we possibly could. I think despite all the negative that's come out of the Vietnam War, all the commentary, all the political baloney that came out of that thing, we did it, and we did a good job of it. And we're proud of that. Really. Excuse me, I'm sorry. It's something that, regardless of all the bad news that came out of that thing, that we are proud of, and it's something they'll never take away from us. I'm not going to get into the politics on the war. It was a mess, of course. Most people understand that today. If you're really interested in what happened in the Vietnam from the 40s to the mid-70s, there's an excellent Ken Burns documentary on right now going on. It's fairly new. It's a series on PBS. You can watch that and really get everything. It's an extraordinary piece from what I've seen of it. I think I'm about halfway through at this point. It's detailed, it's accurate. Be aware that it's dismaying and depressing in many regards. There are other sources of information on Vietnam. There's an excellent book by Carl Morlantis called Matterhorn. It's about the Marine Corps operations up around the DMZ when I was there. I could tell you about quite a few of these operations because I flew them. There's another book if you're interested in the Secret War, the SOG missions, the Special Operations Group. Really a good look at what was going on behind the scenes. I learned a lot from this book. I never knew, quite frankly, what was going on. We'd pick up these guys. We'd be told to go pick up some guys over here and take them over there. Okay. So now I find out when we were flying into the DMZ and into North Vietnam and Laos, which of course we weren't supposed to be there, we were supporting these the spooks, basically. And if you're interested in that aspect of the war, this is an excellent book also. I really liked flying helicopters. It was just a hoot. I'd gone through well, let me first say that, you know, I talked about all the helicopter pilots out there that have been through Vietnam, and this talk I'm going to give really should not be about Fred Pratt. It's really about thousands of guys just like me who were doing the exact same things all those years. And I would like to have this be about a tribute to all the helicopter pilots that served over there, thousands and thousands of them, especially the many pilots and air crew that came home in steel, coffin-draped, flag-draped coffins. Hopefully this talk, if you hear me say me or say I, think about all these guys because they were out there doing it every day. So, like I said, I really enjoyed helicopters. They were just amazing. I'd gone through the Navy pilot training program, which was mostly fixed wing. Got all checked out in fixed wing. It wasn't until I transitioned into helicopters that I just found my true love. Helicopters were, I can say, amazing. You're sitting there on the ground and you're pulling some power, and the next thing you're 10 feet up in the air. And you're sitting there, and it's like, whoa, this is really cool. It's amazing. You could go left, you could go right, you could go forward, you could go backwards. You could spin around in a circle if you wanted, go up, you could go back down on the ground. Total freedom. It always kind of reminded me of a hummingbird flying around in your garden. It was really very, very cool, exhilarating from the beginning. Then, of course, you take that whole experience and you plug it into a combat situation, and it became more so. The adrenaline rush of being in the middle of a firefight and all the stuff that happens in the middle of a firefight, it just pumps you up. I mean, it's a huge high. It really was. You go through as a pilot all the emotions. I mean, you are exhilarated, excited. All in the same day. You could also be deeply depressed. You could be terrified. You could be whatever. All the emotions you can think of, you could go through it as a pilot over there at a factor of maybe 5 times your normal range of emotions. And that was really, really incredible. No question about it. The thing I liked most, and that was a huge high, the thing I liked most about flying in Vietnam were the missions. Our missions were involved with supporting the troops and saving lives. And that was it. We were not an offensive weapon. We weren't shoot-em-up guys. We were simply supporting the troops, saving lives. Just a wonderful mission. Best job, I think, in Vietnam. And it is, quite frankly, one of the main reasons that I got involved 5 years or so ago with the Veterans Treatment Court group. Their mission is exactly the same. The mission of the Veterans Treatment Court: serve the troops, saving lives. Saving lives, you say? I never saw you run a medevac out of the back of the courtroom. No, but if you've come to enough of this and you've heard the veteran graduates speak, you realize that not only figuratively, but literally, this program has saved some lives. Very, 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 very cool. Amy and Virgilio, 2 thumbs up. Great program. So what were the missions we flew? You can consider the helicopter in Vietnam as kind of a combination of a bus and a truck and an ambulance. And that pretty much encompasses what we were doing. We were supporting the troops. A common mission we had was to support a sweep. A sweep was simply we would take a bunch of Marines out, we'd put them at the one end of some crappy valley, and we'd put a little blocking force down at the other end of the crappy valley, and they would proceed to move down through the valley and clean out whatever VC or NVA happened to be in the valley. Mostly NVA. The Marines had the northernmost section of South Vietnam, right along the DMZ and along Cambodia. And it was the main thoroughfare coming through there. And the Marines were a major thorn on the side of the NVA, North Vietnamese Army, as they tried to infiltrate down into South Vietnam. So the sweep would be pretty simple. We'd pick up a whole bunch of guys and we'd take them up. I said I wasn't going to talk about politics, but I have to because this is so ridiculous. We get a mission to sweep Crappy Valley. And we just swept Crappy Valley like 2 months ago. And I was like, what the hell? We just did this. We just took a bunch of losses and now we're going back again. What's that all about? Well, what that was all about was Washington, in their infinite incompetence, decided that this war was not going to be all about any other war before it, which was all about real estate. This war was going to be about attrition. They decided that if we could kill off enough of the enemy, that the enemy would lose their ability and their incentive to keep fighting, and then we would win the war. Colossal blunder. Just totally stupid. So they'd send us out to do these sweeps, and it would be, okay guys, sweep down there, hope you kill more than we get killed, because we need the famous thing from Vietnam, if you were around and watched the news, is body count. The whole war was about body count. It wasn't real estate, body count. We got to kill off a whole bunch of these guys and then they can't keep going. Anyway, that's my political statement. Ken Burns has a real good treatment of that whole thing, by the way. So, in this sweep, we put a whole bunch of guys in here. We go back to the secure base. We pick up a whole bunch more. We put them out there again. It's all unsecure area that we're operating in. And this might take all day, or it might take 2 days, depending on the size of the sweep and the extent of the operation. Usually, once we got done with bringing in the troops and forming up the force that they want to have formed up, they would start taking in whatever they wanted. It could be heavier weapons, mortar teams, or whatever. After that, we were taking in resupply, ammunition, C-rats, water, whatever they needed, usually lots of ammunition. Generally speaking, it was not a surprise when we got there. Secrecy about our missions was non-existent. It was almost always a welcoming party waiting for us. They knew probably where we were going to land because we were just there 2 months ago and did the same damn little thing. So, usually about the second time in, or maybe the third time in with a bunch of guys, taking them in, now you got medevacs coming out. So you come in, you kick off the good guys, you take out the medevacs, the killed, wounded, whatever, and run them off to a field hospital. Now this was, to me, this was a miracle of the Vietnam War, was the helicopter usage in the medevac. The whole of Vietnam at the DMZ was only 60 miles across. And we had some outlying secure zones that we would operate at when we were going out in the field, out in the bush, like crappy power. So we'd go in and we'd offload the troops that were replacements for maybe still the initial wave, and we'd start taking on medevacs. Now, because of the small distances, we were rarely more than 10 or 15 miles, even out Crappy Valley, from a secure site, and they usually had a really excellent field hospitals available. So the helicopters, the 46, would cruise at about 120 knots, maybe 140 miles an hour. We could cover like 2.5 miles a minute. So we could pick up these guys in the zone and shoot them into an adequate, good field hospital in 10 minutes, 15 minutes at the most. I mean, in the history of warfare, many, many more people died after the battle because of the wounds they received during the battle. And it was either a combination of not having medical attention available, or it simply wasn't accessible. But now, I mean, somebody gets shot, they might have just got shot in the LZ when you dropped them off, and boom, back on the helicopter, and half an hour later, max, they're in a field hospital getting treated. It's an amazing, life-saving event. I figured in my 13 months, I easily carried several hundred medevacs myself out of the field, off to the hospital. You know, you multiply that by thousands of helicopters and helicopter pilots, and the life-saving factor in that war was just astounding, just amazing. And that, to me, was the whole miracle of Vietnam. So we pick up a bunch of medevacs, zing, we shoot them back to the hospital, offload them, back to the secure zone, load up some more troops, back to the firefight. Usually by this time they were pretty heavily engaged. Pick up some more medevacs, back to the hospital, pick up some more ammunition and water, whatever, and you can kind of see what happens. This would go on for a week, or depending on the size of the operation, it might be, like the sweep might be 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Big ones were amazing. So this is how we spent our days. I mean, it was troops, it was resupply, and it was medevacs. And that was pretty much the mission of the helicopter pilot. I had to make some notes here because, like I said, I'm so nervous I can't remember why I'm even here. I have to tell you one experience I had, which was amazing. We flew back to the helicopter, the hospital pad, and they know you're coming. The medics and the orderlies and the nurses and all, they know you're coming. So you come in, you land, you drop the ramp down in the back, and these guys are all poised. I mean, they've got stretchers, they've got IV bottles, they're ready to go. They come right on the helicopter and start treating the guys on the helicopter while you're sitting there turning and burning in the zone. So once they get the immediate guys addressed, load them on a stretcher, any of the ambulatory medevacs that have already gotten off, and they're going towards they're being helped towards the hospital. But now here come the guys on the stretchers. So there was this one time when I'm sitting there in the helicopter, and you wait for this to happen, of course. They're saving lives, you're not in any big hurry to get back to where you were. So looking out the window of the helicopter, you know, and I'm sitting there. Excuse me. Here comes a stretcher, and it's got this Marine on there, and he is just a mess. There's blood all over the place. The stretcher's bloody, he's all chopped up. The nurse going along, holding the IV drip, and they're kind of chugging along towards the field hospital. I'm looking down at him, and he looks up at me, and we make eye contact. He gives me this big smile. Big smile and a thumbs up. amazing experience. Amazing. Something like that, some experience like that, just one. And it made the whole stinking 13-month tour worthwhile. It really did. So anyway, so we're dropping off all these guys at the hospital. By that time, we probably need some fuel. We go back to the base, and they've got a whole line of hot refueling spots. You never shut down. You kind of pull in there. It's sort of like an Indy 500 pit row. Just kind of zip in there, and plug you in, and fill you up, and shoot you back into the action. You got about enough time, if you're lucky, to unstrap and jump out and relieve yourself on the tarmac. Off you go again. Occasionally, depending on the airfield and depending on the medevacs you've been running, the crew chief will tell you, hey, we need to clean this thing out. It's getting dangerous back here. It's just too damn slippery. So you pull over to the side of the tarmac, and they had some fire hoses over there. And you pull up to one of these fire hoses, and the crew chief would grab a fire hose and he'd come in the front of the helicopter, and he'd be in hosing out all the mud and the blood and the more blood and a bunch of spent brass, whatever other kind of debris you happen to pick up when you're out flying around. So they hose out, clean out all this stuff, and back to work. There you go. So you're back going. The medevacs, again, were the amazing. I was talking about W's and K's, or WIAs and KIAs, wounded in action, killed in action. And is it just me, or can anybody think of a really more god-awful name for an automobile than a KIA? What the hell are they thinking? I'll be driving around Santa Maria here in the traffic, and I pull up behind a car, and it's got this big emblem on the back, KIA. And it always hits me with a jolt. It always does, because I start thinking about too many of my very good friends who were KIA. And it's something that I'm not really ready to be thinking about, sitting in traffic on Broadway in the middle of a nice sunny day. But there it is. What are you going to say? The combat at the pointy end of the stick, which is where we operated, it developed some very special relationships, some special bonding, quite frankly. The being under fire, the team requirements that you have to work with the guys, the development of the, what's the right word? I wrote it down. Camaraderie that's developed during those things. This whole band of brothers attitude, it's really very strong. It becomes a real bond. And it stays with you. It's ingrained in you, and it stays with you for a very, very long time. Witness this group here today. The band of brothers. I mean, everybody's here. It's tight. It's really tight. So, what was it like for the pilot? Usually the day started early, dark. You're sleeping away in this cot in your tent or whatever situation it was, and pretty soon this shaking his shoulder. Good morning, Lieutenant. It's time to go flying. So you make your way down to the ready room, and you get briefed on the flight, and you check out your helicopter, and you go off and you fly the missions, whatever it happened to be. I'm going to run through one more quick mission with you besides the sweep, because it's sort of indicative of what was going through the pilot's head. So you're out there flying around, and maybe you're doing a routine resupply or something, and you get a call on the radio and it says, hey, you got to break that thing off, we got an emergency recon extract. That's the worst thing you could ever possibly do. I mean, emergency recon extract, any mission that you had which had you were given which had the emergency tag stuck to it, meant that if you did not accomplish that mission, somebody was going to die. Just that simple. Emergency mission, somebody's going to die, go get it done. So the recon boys, and I can say this because Ron over here was a Vietnam recon guy, and I flew a lot of recon inserts and extracts. So I can say with some authority that the recon guys, they were all nuts. They were all loony. I mean, the mission these guys had was to, we'd take them way the hell out in the boondocks and drop them off, and 3 or 4 or 5 days later, we'd go back and pick them up. And in the meantime, they're out there snooping around, maybe right along the Laotian border, and they're checking out the enemy. That's what it boils down to. They could be overlooking one of the many trails that comprise the whole Ho Chi Minh Trail. There might be 2 regiments of NVA regulars down there. And the NVA regulars, by the way, I should point out, these guys were good. This was not, most people in the United States thought you were fighting a bunch of ragtag Viet Cong. And that, after a period of time, was not the case. I mean, these guys, with their Russian and their Chinese training and their backing and their equipment, this was a formidable fighting force. So don't let anybody tell you that it was an easy deal fighting the Viet Cong, because it wasn't. So the recon guys are out there, and they're snooping around, and they're checking out troop strengths, and they might be looking down in the valley at several regiments of NVA. And they're checking out troop strengths and weaponry and all that kind of stuff. Basically just gathering intelligence to take back. Did I just use the word Marine Corps intelligence in the same sentence? I'm sorry about that. I'm a little nervous about this whole thing, but that's... So the whole objective of the recon guys is to go out there and gather up all this intelligence and take it back to the real world, back to the base, for use in designing the war. Their main objective is to not get caught out there, not be discovered. If they could get in and out without making any contact, that was the way the mission was supposed to be run. When I was there, that was, good luck with that. So once they make contact with the enemy is really upset because they don't like people snooping around on them and reporting back to the troop strengths. So several thousand NVA guys, they've discovered a recon team out there of half a dozen guys, usually, something like that.
Usually 4 or 5.
Yeah, 4 or 5. I think we used to carry 6, maybe if you needed some extra help. But anyway, those guys have made contact. They need to get out of there right now. So you've got this call. You're kind of up in the area of the DMZ or Quezon or Laos. Didn't make any difference. So you start flying out that way. And of course, I'm thinking to myself, half a dozen recon Marines versus 300 or 400 NVA regulars sound like a pretty fair fight to me. They said, no, you got to go get them. You got to. Okay. So once you start heading out that way, you got to start working the radios. And the radios in the helicopter were astoundingly unbelievable. We had actually 4 different communications radios that we would monitor, and 1 navigation radio that we also monitored. The grunts on the ground with their field radios, that was all FM frequency, Fox Mike. The other helicopters and yourself usually operated on the VHF, very high frequency. There was another aviation frequency, UHF, ultra high frequency, which is mostly where the Zoomies were. They kind of stayed by themselves up there at 30,000 feet or something and talked on UHF. We didn't really want to hear from them. UHF also included a guard channel, which in addition to the channel you might be mentioning, or might be monitoring, the guard channel you always monitored because that was the Mayday, that was the emergency frequency. So you always want to hear about any Mayday calls from your fellow pilots. The fourth radio was your communications with your crew members, call it intercom. So we talk to your co-pilot or your crew chief or your gunner or anybody else that happened to be plugged in. The fifth radio was ADF, it was the navigation radio called ADF, Automatic Direction Finder, and it was simply you could tune into an AM radio station, and there was a point on the console that would point in the direction of that radio station once you got it tuned in. The nice thing about that was that in order to make sure you were tuned into the right station, you could monitor whatever that station was broadcasting. In Vietnam, that was Armed Forces Radio, and any of you that happened to see Robin Williams in Good Morning Vietnam, that was Robin Williams, and that was a very accurate portrayal of what was going on. So we'd be flying around Vietnam, and we never used the ADF for navigation, but it was really cool flying around listening to the really good rock and roll from the mid-'60s. It's kind of in the background, but it was still there. So anyway, so you're flying out there and you got to gather up some help. So we call up a couple of Hueys, get a couple of Hueys to go along. The Hueys, they were slicks, but they would have a pair of M60 30 caliber machine guns. Usually have rocket pod on each side with the 2.75 rockets that were somewhat accurate. They kind of tended to do this every once in a while, and you're always worried because if you were and then any other support you can get. I would often go up on the guard channel, which we really weren't supposed to do. That's emergency frequency. But I'd go up with some kind of a call like, hey, this is Injure 10, which I call sign, up on guard, looking for any fixed wing with ordnance around the Quezon area. And I didn't really care who was there or what kind of ordnance they were carrying. I just wanted some support. So it could be Air Force, it could be Marine Corps, it could be Navy flying around up there. If they had some bombs left over, they didn't know what to do with, I had a good use for them. Because I knew when we got out to where we were going to need all that stuff going for us. So, and it also didn't make much difference what they carried, quite frankly. The close support guys were usually carrying snakes or napalm. The bigger, higher level bombing guys were carrying 250, 500 pound bombs. If we were lucky enough to get an F-8, they had these 20 millimeter cannons on each wing. And the 20 millimeter cannons, the way they were set up, they could tear up a lot of jungle, make a lot of noise, tear up jungle. Very intimidating to have an F-8 come screaming down on you when you're sitting in the jungle. Which is really the whole point. I didn't really much care about killing off NVA. What I really wanted was to have so much noise being made and so much flashbang stuff going on that the NVA were going to duck their heads and get out of the way of this mess, hopefully long enough that we could get in and out of the zone and accomplish the mission that we had. So the more bang and the more flash and the more fire was great as far as I was concerned. So anyway, we're getting close to the zone by now because everything's so close, like I said, and we're probably, click out half a mile or something. Now it's time to call the recon team. So you come up on Fox Mike, a prearranged frequency, and you know kind of where they're supposed to be. When you're at 1,500 to 2,000 feet, the jungle all looks alike. You look down, you can't know where they are. So anyway, so you call the, hey Looney recon guy, this is your ride home, over. And we didn't actually say that. It was a little more formal than that. But that was kind of the point. So the next thing you hear is going to tell you a lot about what your afternoon is going to be like. Because as soon as he keys his mic, you're going to hear what's going on the ground. And most often you're going to hear this guy huffing and puffing and huffing and puffing and maybe some sporadic gunfire in the background. And you know these guys are running. And they're running for the LZ and they got a whole hundreds of PC or NVA chasing them. So that was usually what happened because they didn't want to get to the zone too quick because then they're pinned down. So anyway, the other thing you might hear when they key the mic is a god-awful amount of gunfire going on and the radio is yelling and screaming in the mic. That's going to be a bad deal. You know you got some problems when that happens. Third option, which didn't fortunately happen too much, is you hear the mic keyed and you don't hear anything. What? What's going on? And suddenly you realize the guy's whispering on the radios. It's like, it's kind of like, hey, Injure, we're here, everything's cool, come on down. So I say, hey, loony recon guy, are you in the zone? Yeah, we're in the zone. Looney, are you taking fire? No, we're not in contact at all. We're not taking any fire. So, that's true. So that's going to be a bad deal too. Call him back and say, Looney, if everything is so cool down there, why are you whispering? Because you know why he's whispering, because if he speaks up, the guy about 30 yards away with an AK-47 is going to open up on him. So anyway, you're flying out there, and when the recon teams are in the LZ, it's time to time to tell them to pop a smoke. And that simply means they're going to take a smoke grenade, they're going to throw it in the middle of where they want you to land, and that's going to be your target. And you really need that because you can't see anything else down there. You right away are going to call them to confirm the color of the smoke that they just popped. Say yellow. Say, Looney, what's your smoke? And they said, yellow smoke. Oh, thank you very much, because maybe a click over this way, the red smoke has gone up, and a half a click over this way, a blue smoke has gone up. And the NVA weren't stupid. They know, they're monitoring the frequencies. They know what pop smoke means, so they pop smoke. And they just hope that some dumb Marine helicopter pilot is going to spiral down to the wrong smoke, and they'll have a nice warm welding. So anyway, so you tell the guys on the ground, okay, Looney, I got your pause, I'm on my way down. Then you start working the radios again. You got to coordinate with the Hueys, you got to coordinate with the Zoomies, and you're talking to the guys on the ground. The way you approach, the way you get into one of these hot zones is you fly directly over the site, right directly over it. You push the power down, you cut off all the power to both engines, you push the nose over, and you start this big spiral down into the zone. Why? Well, there's two reasons. You're pushing off the power because you want to get down there as quick as possible. You're just basically a rock at that point, falling towards this yellow smoke. Why the spiral? Because you really want to stay over where at least there are some friendlies. Probably some amount of less chance of getting shot at, like on the way down. And if you do happen to get shot down, you end up in the zone, and you got some friendlies down there to look after you. Hopefully, different looking. So anyway, you're in this big light spiral, and you're zooming down towards this yellow smoke. And you start at maybe 2,000, 1,500 feet. About 300 or 400 or 500 feet, you start taking fire, which is inevitable. That's when you become a nice big target. This thing is, from tip to tip, is about 90 feet long. The blades are 50 feet wide. Fuselage is about as big as an oil tanker you see going down the freeway on a trailer. It's just a wonderful target. Slow and big, and I don't know how they ever could miss. Fortunately, they did. So you go spiraling down. You start taking fire. You start telling your gun. You call your gunners. You carry 2 50s. There's your target. So they're start banging away with the 50s on the target. You talk to the Hueys. They start throwing some rockets in there. The Hueys, by this time, are controlling the fixed wing to keep them away from you, basically. So pretty soon, the fixed wing are making runs on this thing, and you're spiraling down, and you get pretty close to the ground, and you pick the nose way up on the helicopter to bleed off the airspeed, and then you start pulling in power to cushion the rate of descent, because you're going down pretty fast. And if everything works out okay, plunk, you get into the zone. Ramp goes down in the back. Now it's up to the recon team to get their butts on the helicopter. And there's nothing you can do as a pilot at that point other than just watch and wait. You're sitting up here in the front of the helicopter. You're fairly high off the ground. You got an excellent view of the LZ, which pretty quickly you realize that if you got an excellent view of the LZ, they got a pretty excellent view of you too. It's kind of a two-way street. So you're looking out in the tree line, and you're seeing the muzzle flashes, and you know that's not good. You're calling your 50s to kind of do whatever they can do up against this tree line, and you're talking to the Hueys and trying to figure out how you're going to get yourself out of there. You're going to be heavy, and it's hot, and It's altitude. You're not going to get out nearly as fast as you got in there. You sit there and try to work this all out in your brain anyway. Meanwhile, the nape is going off over here, and the rockets are coming in here, and radios are blaring away, and in the background you've got Dionne Warwick going, "Do you know the way to San Jose?" And you're thinking, "Yeah, man, I know the way to San Jose. Get my butt out of here, and I'll show you the way to San Jose." So you're doing all this stuff, and you're waiting for the team to get on board, because you're not going anywhere. You're not even going to move until everybody's on board. All the ambulatory guys, all the W's, any of the K's, they got to be on board. Nobody gets left behind. So you get to sit and enjoy this big fireworks show. You check in the back, you're talking to your crew chief the whole time. He's letting you know what the situation is. They're back there banging away on the 50s. The team is getting on board, hopefully. Occasionally you look out in the zone and you'll see, holy crap, that's my crew chief out there. He's unplugged and he's dragging these bodies on board the helicopter. They were amazing. Crew chiefs are absolutely amazing. Could give you another hour's worth of stories about how wonderful the crew chief was, crew chiefs were. Pretty soon, the crew chief has gotten everybody on board. They cleared it with the team leader, and go, go, go. And of course, you're ready to go. Get the hell out of there. So you're going to pull in all the power you got. You don't know if you got enough because you're heavy. You're pulling whatever power you got, and you got to kind of, well, at that point, you really have to zone out or maybe zone in. You get this big tunnel vision thing going on. And flying in and out of a hot zone, excuse me, was tricky enough without worrying about or even thinking about anything other than flying. There's been a lot made recently about distracted driving. Flying in one of these combat situations was distracted driving on steroids. The other situation is that you have got 8 or 10 guys in the back whose lives depend on you getting this thing done correctly. So you really don't have time or the energy or the desire to be thinking about any of these other distractions. Just fly the helicopter. So in this case, we fly out, we get out relatively safe, and fly on home. It's a joyful trip home, always. We'll stop and drop off the recon team at their base, maybe perhaps make a stop at the hospital. By the way, I should mention that it's taken me 5 or 10 minutes to talk about, just to describe being in a hot zone with the bombs and the guns and everything else going off. When you're there, time really kind of slows down, and it seems like hours that you're sitting there waiting for something to happen. But in reality, it's only maybe 20 or 30 seconds that you're on the ground. And you hope it's not going to be any more than that, because that's really a long time to be a sitting duck while you're there. These helicopters, they could absorb a lot of hot lead, but they don't absorb an awful lot before they're simply not going anywhere, and you not with it. So anyway, we fly back to the base. Could be Quang Tri, could it be Phu-Bai, could be down at Marble Mountain in Da Nang. Refuel the helicopter, park it, go into the ready room and fill out the maintenance log on the helicopter, and do your after-action reports, any kind of debriefings that need to be done. And then you're off to a really important meeting down at the Oak Club with Mr. Budweiser and a number of his very good friends. Eventually, later on, you'll get cleaned up, go enjoy some of that wonderful Marine Corps chow, head back to the hooch, where hopefully there's some mail waiting for you. You might write a few letters of your own, listen to Armed Forces Radio, read a book, and simply crash. So what seems like maybe several minutes later, you are laying there and here comes this young man again, and he's shaking you on the shoulder and, "Good morning, Lieutenant. Time to go flying." So that's pretty much a day in the life of a helicopter pilot, myself and thousands of others. My life, 1968. I'd like to finish up with one more thought, and that is that the military, going through the military, it instills a lot of attitudes in anybody that goes through it. One of the things that I picked up on early on down in Pensacola in the pilot training, and used it extensively and developed it in Vietnam, was, if it is to be, it's up to me. If it is to be, it's up to me. Why do I bring that up now? It's because I've seen that same concept, that same attitude in all of our graduates here today. This VTC program is not an easy thing to go through. There are many, many meetings with the VTC team. There are counseling sessions, there are therapy sessions, there are substance testing, there are 2 days of court appearances every month. This is not an easy deal. On top of all that, these vets have got a lot of peer pressure, a lot of pressures from the outside, ex-girlfriends, the good old boys who are still doing all the stuff that got them into trouble in the first place, and they really don't like to see one of their buddies take off from their little group and try to make life better for himself. They really kind of resent that, and there's a lot of pressure on these guys in the course of the year. I know I have mentored over the years enough vets to know that in every situation, in every 12-month program for these guys, there comes a point in time when there's a real doubt, a real question as to whether they even want to continue. All this stuff kind of adds up against them. And these folks here have overcome all of that. They've had their, if it is to be, it's up to me moment. And for that, I applaud every single one of them.